All right, so we've got part B of the What Makes You Woman series in the modules. And so we're focusing in this really second half on using the menstrual cycle as an aid to your training. So it is definitely what you could refer to as an ergogenic aid, or something that improves your performance when you know how to work with it. So again, we've talked about previously the first and second half of your menstrual cycle relating to ovulation. So the first half is also known as the follicular phase, and that's pre-ovulation. So in the follicular phase, training is likely to feel easier and you'll have better recovery. You have what's referred to as higher heart rate variability. And basically that means that your body has more ability to adapt to stress placed on it. So you have greater gains with muscle mass, strength and power than post-ovulation. So this is the time to really essentially push hard. So a lot of people think when they've got their period, for people with symptoms, it can be uncomfortable. I'm not denying that. But from a performance perspective, it's the best time to be getting out and pushing hard is those kind of the first 10 to 14 days of your cycle. So you have increased levels of endurance, you have higher aerobic capacity. Estrogen helps with stress and is anabolic, so you build muscle. So you've got that, remember that peak in estrogen in that first half of your cycle. And you're more carbohydrate tolerant and insulin sensitive. So basically it means that you metabolize carbohydrates more easily in the first half of your cycle than you do in the second half. So comparing to the luteal phase or the post-ovulation phase, so essentially this is opposite when you're in the high hormone phase. Training is likely to feel harder with a much slower recovery. You have a lower heart rate variability during this time. You have reduced ability to build muscle and feel strong and have power. So if you're a cyclist, you might not feel like you're able to hit the same watts on the bike or lift at the gym. The same kilos might be harder than they are before your ovulation. You have reduced levels of endurance, a lower aerobic capacity. You need more carbs for higher intensity activity, as high estrogen causes a reduced ability to use carbs and glycogen stores. So basically during this high hormone phase, it's just harder to tap into the glycogen. You may find that you've got heat intolerance, higher body temperatures generally, which can impact sleep as well. Progesterone does offset estrogen, because if you remember from that graph, progesterone is elevated considerably, and progesterone is actually more catabolic, so that's breaking down. So that is working opposite what we want with from an estrogen perspective. You're more likely to have unstable blood sugar levels and less sensitive to insulin, and often more hungry. Research shows that after ovulation, women burn more calories, up to 200-300 calories a day more than pre-ovulation. And it's all about getting ready to maintain a pregnancy. So some other symptoms that I feel like I've skipped a screen, but no. Other symptoms is you may get bloating, and that's because progesterone blocks a diuretic hormone known as aldosterone, and estrogen increases the release of another hormone, vasopressin, which retains water. So when you're in this high hormone phase, you've just got hormones working against you to retain fluid. So that can be in your ankles, and you can feel like your gut is You have more bloating, and that's just a natural hormone response during this time. You may get more headaches, and this can be triggered by blood pressure changes and changes just in this shifting between vasoconstriction and dilation. And one way you can get around that is to eat nitric oxide rich foods. So rocket and beetroot are excellent. Fatigue, you may find that you're more fatigued. Estrogen increases serotonin at this time after ovulation, but overall it's not well understood how estrogen and progesterone impact fatigue. And it's likely in the brain, if you remember we said before about the impact of estrogen in the brain. You can also get gut issues. Progesterone slows the gut smooth muscle contractility, causing constipation. And also you've got the release of prostaglandins. If they're released in excess, they can cause increases in contractility, leading to diarrhea and cramping. So usually that cramping that you feel around your period can be related to an excess of prostaglandins. And one thing that you might find helpful, if that's a problem for you, is just having omega-3 supplementation through your cycle. So what can you do? You can, but don't have to, adjust your training accordingly to your cycle. So you may find that you focus on building muscle and harder exercise pre-ovulation, and after ovulation focus on low and slow exercises such as slower runs, maybe shorter runs, yoga, or even just walking. So the first step is to track your cycle if you don't already, to identify how you feel. So there's some excellent apps. Wild AI, Fitter Woman are great, and now Garmin and Apple also offer them. And I would assume Samsung, but I'm not sure. So let's just briefly look at some macronutrients that are important during this time. So looking at protein, particularly a branched chain amino acid protein called leucine. So leucine is a key amino acid and is one of 3 branch chain amino acids. So you can see there that basically the amine group is the same, and then it's just the branch is different to create the different amino acid. So branch chain refers to the chemical structure of the amino acid. The major player is leucine for building muscle. It signals to cells to build muscle. It's an essential amino acid and must be ingested in adequate amounts of in the diet. So it means your body doesn't make it. So ideally 3 grams of leucine post-training is what we're aiming for. And branched chain amino acids have reduced impact than when consumed as a whole protein, such as whey. So what I mean by that is you can buy branched chain amino acids as a supplement, and some people just have them in their smoothie after the gym or whatever. However, they've not been shown to be as effective as 2 other forms. One is there's a next level up that you can buy called essential amino acids, which contain not only the branched chain amino acids and leucine, but other essential amino acids. Or the most optimal is to actually have a complete protein, and whey concentrate or whey isolate has really the highest level of leucine out of all the proteins. So if you're looking at buying a protein powder, then please check what amount or how many grams of leucine it has in it. And check per serve, not per 100 grams. So these are generally foods high in leucine. And so you can see that a lot of it is really animal based foods, and certainly they're the most readily available for us. We metabolize those more easily than plant-based proteins. And so generally I say is that we aim for food first and supplement second. So if you're at the gym a lot, then there might be a place, or you're pushed for time, for having a protein drink. And a lot of people do, and that's not wrong, but just aim really for a whole protein rather than just getting a branched chain amino acid supplement. So looking at carbohydrate, as we've talked about, the age and stage of our cycle impacts how well we can utilize carbohydrates, our body composition and muscle mass as well. The more muscle mass we have, the more effective our carbohydrate metabolism will be. Activity levels, training status and goals, our personal preference and sensitivities. Food culture will impact our carbohydrate intake, current metabolic health, whether you do or don't have diabetes or you're at risk of diabetes, genetics, medical status, whether you've got autoimmune issues, and also what your menstrual health situation is currently, whether you're ovulating, not ovulating, on the pill, etc. So women are more susceptible to issues with low carbohydrate diets. You can get anxiety, insomnia. There's conversions of the active hormone. There's interruptions of the conversion of thyroid hormone T4 to T3, which is the active hormone. So we want T3. But say carbohydrate, like ketogenic diets, have been shown to impact this balance in a short space of time. And also insulin is required to convert T4 to T3. So if you're not triggering insulin, then this can also be a problem. So you can also get microbiome issues if you're not taking in enough carbohydrate to help your training. Constipation, you can get you completely lose your period or just irregular period. That HPA axis dysfunction that we've talked about, and even some people can get hair loss if they're not eating enough. So some of this information is recommended by Dr. Sims, who is a female nutritionist and exercise physiologist. And I totally agree with her for no fasted training for women, as I think we've talked about previously, due to the impacts on cortisol. When you wake up on a morning, your cortisol is already elevated, and that's normal, or it should be. We want it elevated, but then if we exercise on top of that, it can go too high and impact our conversion of other hormones, like I showed you in that cascade in the previous video about how well we can actually make other hormones. So ideally, we're aiming for about 20 to 30 grams of carbohydrate pre-exercise. That's in the follicular phase. And during the luteal phase, you can have an extra 15 grams, say, of whey protein, also to decrease nervous system fatigue caused by estrogen and progesterone. So again, we don't know why necessarily these impact fatigue so much, but pre-training, you might find that having a bit of protein in the second half of your cycle also helps to offset some of that fatigue. So to calculate your carbohydrate intake, we did talk earlier about the 45 kilocalories per day. So this is getting even more nuanced, where you might look at 0.32 grams of carbohydrate per pound of body weight. So this is a Sims US equation. And so this is the equation I've done to convert it. So you can put your weight in. So if we're doing 60 kilos by 2.2, because there's 2.2 pounds to the kilo. So that would mean that someone who is 60 kilos is then 132 pounds. So if we do 132 pounds times 0.3, 32 grams of carbs, then in the follicular phase or pre-ovulation, we're aiming for around 42 grams of carbohydrate per hour of exercise. And that's just kind of at a base to really keep things ticking over. So that's, some people have up to 90 grams of carbohydrate. That's very high, and your gut really needs to be trained for something that high. But probably around this is a pretty good marker for that you're aiming for per hour of exercise. So, excuse me, same again for post-ovulation, same carbohydrate, but because you're more carb intolerant and you need higher levels of carbohydrate and also just calorie intake in general after ovulation needs to be a bit higher. So we're aiming for closer to 60 grams of carbs per hour of exercise. And that is the end of this talk. So hopefully that's helpful. Don't forget, if you've got any questions, please put them in the Facebook group or reach out, and I would love to answer just to clarify anything. And thanks for listening.